This is what I'm going to be making. It's a 3D printed adapter that allows me to mount a shop light to a light stand. Using a spring and 2 interlocking profiles, it allows the light to be rotated and locked in at 45-degree increments. As usual, the process begins with modeling in FreeCAD. I start by making the part that mounts to the light stand itself. It's an 8-toothed gear attached to a cylinder, and this is what will fit into the piece that mounts on the light stand. I want the end of the gear to be chamfered so things slide more easily. To do that, I loft it to a slightly smaller gear profile that is offset from the end of the main gear. I need to cut out some space for the bolt to fit into, so I model the approximate shape of the bolt and Boolean cut it out of the main part. In this transparent view, you can see what's going on. As I'm building up the model, I add chamfers wherever I can. Next is the part that'll mount on the light stand itself. This part will have the same gear profile cut into it that the other part can fit into, leaving some margin so that the two pieces don't interfere. I wanted the entryway to this cutout to be chamfered as well to make things slide easily, and the easiest way to do that is to loft between a few offset profiles. You can get an idea here of how the two pieces fit together. To let the bolt pass through, a hole also needs to be cut into this piece. I'm using 3/8 inch hardware here. I'm playing with chamfers again. These help to reduce stressor and make the parts look a little bit more finished. Now I need to make the coupler to let this thing actually mount to the light stand. It's basically a cylinder, and on the inside I create a profile that accounts for the shape of the light stand mount. This profile gets revolved and then cut out of the light stand mount cylinder. Throughout this whole process, I'm measuring the things that these parts need to fit onto and tweaking any dimensions that need adjustment. To make things easier to position, I rotated the entire model 22.5 degrees, which allows me to keep the light stand coupler vertical. The light stand coupler needs a hole for a locking screw that'll keep it firmly attached to the light stand. I originally planned to tap threads directly into the plastic for the lock screw, but later you'll see I decided this was too weak and instead put in a pocket for an M5 hex nut. This will be much stronger and won't require me to cut threads into relatively brittle resin. Since this hole is no longer going to be tapped, I have to resize it so an M5 bolt will fit. And of course, adding more chamfers. This is what it looks like so far. My plan is to epoxy this adapter directly to the shop light. The small surface area here doesn't give me much confidence in that sticking, so I decided to add a larger rectangular plate to increase the glue area. Adding a few more chamfers and adjusting the angle of the plate, and this part is done. Here's a very fast look at how the part was sliced for printing. It was printed in 2 pieces, the piece that mounts to the light itself and the piece that connects to the light stand. I used very fine supports in the part that mounts to the light stand because these will be visible in the final product and I want to minimize the amount of damage they cause when they're removed. After slicing, we do a few hours of the old in and out on the 3D printer, and we get our final parts. Up first, here's the part that mounts to the light stand. On the back you can see where the 3D printed supports were removed, and in the coupler part you can see the hole for the lock screw. Next is the part that will get glued to the shop light. On the mounting plate I went with larger support material, and after removal they leave quite large craters. These are ideal in this case because it will increase the surface area for the epoxy to bond to. On the other side you can get a good look at the gear profile that allows for the light to lock in at 45-degree increments, testing out the various positions, and things are looking good. The M5 nut needs to be glued in place. It's a good fit, but gluing it in place will prevent it from falling out when the lock screw is inserted. Getting it into place is a bit fiddly, but I get it in there. I'm using the lock screw to fully seat the nut and to make it easier to clean up the glue squeeze out. Here's a closer look at the nut glued into the pocket. After a few hours, the glue is set up, and now I'm just testing out the lock screw to see if it's working as expected. This light mount uses 3/8 inch hardware and a spring I found in my junk bins. Another test of the functionality, and things are looking good. It's working just like I wanted it to. It's a fun mechanism to play with. It's kinda ugly with all that hardware sticking out the back, but I went very form from function on this project. This is how it mounts to a light stand. You just jam it on top and tighten the lock screw. Using both hands, I can pull it apart and position it wherever I want it, and then the spring pulls both parts back together and locks everything in place. Now that it's done, the last step is to glue it onto the shop light itself. Here's a very sped up view of how that went. First I scuffed up the finish on the light, then I mixed up some 2-part epoxy, applied a generous amount to the back plate and a little bit to the light, and finally I positioned it and let the epoxy cure for almost 2 days. And like I showed at the beginning, this is the light stand mount in action. Overall, I'm very pleased with how it turned out. I was able to use most of the materials I already had on hand to make it, and it functions exactly how I wanted it to. Thanks for watching.